would you ask our prayer this morning? Okay. I'd like to call this July 28th, 2017 meeting to order. We do have a quorum present, and I will ask Mr. Sparks if he would ask our invocation, please.
Let us bow. Dear Heavenly Father, we come now and thank you, Father, for another day. Father, we pray and ask now that you will be with us all as we go into this business about the community, about the Columbus Municipal School District. We ask also that you will give us the boldness to do those things that are right. Father, we thank you for all that you've done and all that you're going to do for this district. These and many other blessings you do, ask in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Please rise with me. Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to everyone thank you for being here this morning. We do have our agenda before us, and board, there are a couple of adjustments of kind of the way it's described on the agenda. If we look at item that we need to amend before adopting the agenda, if we look at item number 7 under Office of Business Management, it says consideration to approve FY18 budget, and then down below under item B, it says consideration to approve ad valorem tax resolution. That should actually have the language of discussion of FY18 budget and discussion of ad valorem tax resolution. Those two items, we do have a lot of information. I'm sure some questions to go through today. We are missing a couple of our board members as well, so we will take those up at our review meeting coming up on August the 9th. Which will still give us plenty of time to get everything approved in order to send it over to the council, as well as continue to operate, as we've been doing throughout July, because we did approve last year's budget in August as well. So, I think that's still not of any type of consequence. Now, the last item is C, discussion of preliminary official statement for debt refunding. I put this on the agenda today, even though the board unanimously had given consent for me to make the adjustments needed so that they being Stevens and Young and Muni Group would be able to make these adjustments, and I could sign off on them. But just as I'd provided to you the revisions and, of course, the new official statement so that we can carry forward on our timeline of getting everything finalized on our debt refunding, that is actually a consideration to approve and not discussion of. Yes, Dr. Hickman.
Sorry, Mr. Spears. And the updated in front of you, the HR report, we had taken off one person, Stephanie Montgomery. She is currently a librarian. We were putting her at the gifted middle school position, but that was a mistake, so we just took her off. So.
Okay.
This is the corrected version. She's just not on there. That's the only thing. If that's okay with you.
That's fine.
Thank you, sir.
Board, is that okay with you to remove it? Oh, it's already been removed on the one that we're approved. Okay. All right. So, board, with the changes in language and, of course, the items on today's agenda, I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Has been motioned by Mr. Sparks. Do I have a second?
Second.
Has been seconded by Dr. Shoemake. Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we move to the next item, which is item number 4, which is consideration to approve corrected minutes from the May 8, 2017. I believe this had to do with the fact of one trustee not being present at the meeting or something. And so those minutes have been updated and corrected, so I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Has been motioned by Dr. Shoemake. Do I have a second? I'll make the second. Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we go to the consent agenda, which is consideration to approve student transfers. I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Has been motioned by Mr. Sparks. Do I have a second? I'll make the second. Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we go to Office of Superintendent. We have, let's see, is that 7 requests to release from employment contract. And Dr. Hickman, I'll turn this over to you because I know that there's some I believe I've identified that are listed here with replacing such and such. So I don't know if we're going to take all these as one or if you're going to want to split out. How do you want?
And there's only one that we do not have a suitable replacement for that I do not suggest to be released, and that's Harlow.
Okay, Harlow. That is Christopher Harlow. That's the third one listed there. Okay, so I would assume, Mr. Dunn, it's okay to take the group of the rest as one, and then the others, if there's different. So is it going to be different recommendations for the
The rest I do recommend.
Okay, so we have.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we do have release recommendation for Benjamin Cochran, Brandy Colvin, Vanessa Olivios, Lindsley, Katina Robinson, and Betsy Swedenberg. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the superintendent's recommendation is to release those employees from contract. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Has been motioned by Mr. Sparks. Do I have a second?
Second.
Has been seconded by Dr. Shoemake. Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we go back to one item under there, which is the employment contract for Christopher Harlow. Dr. Hickman, what is your recommendation?
My recommendation is not to release that person from their contract.
Okay. And so Dr. Hickman's recommendation is not to release this one person from, so I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
It's been motioned by Mr. Sparks. Do I have a second?
Second.
Has been seconded by Dr. Shoemake. Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we go to item 6B, which is staff personnel items. And just to clarify, under staff personnel, and let me just check it here, with what is posted online versus what was given to us, let's see here. Was that under change of assignment, Dr. Hickman? Okay. Okay, so just know that what is posted online still includes the individual, so we're voting on the updated personnel sheet that we talked about at the beginning that does not include number 11 under change of assignment. So is everybody understanding? Okay, so I need a motion for approval of staff personnel.
So moved.
Has been motioned by Mr. Sparks. I'll make the second. Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we go to the next item, which is Office of Business Management, discussion of the FY18 budget. And Dr. Hickman, would you like to turn it over to Ms. Holmes? Ms. Holmes?
Ms. Holmes?
Mr. President, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Mr. President, Dr. Hickman, members of the Board of Trustees, what you have before you is a preliminary draft that has been updated of the budget that is inclusive of the modified tax levy request also. You will see that from, without getting ahead of myself, the tax levy that we're requesting for operations is a little over $10.4 million. That is inclusive in the 1120 fund for the district maintenance operations, with the net total revenues of $29.5 million for all general, for 11 fund 1120. You'll see for the combined budget for general funds, we're estimating almost $40 million for the combined budget, $40.4 million in revenues, $29.6 million in total general revenues, $8.4 million in special revenues, and those are like our IDEA, title funds, child nutrition funds, etc. Debt services, we're requesting $2.38 million. That's inclusive of the debt operations with consideration for the refunding of the GO bonds. permanent trust 19,000, and then for a total of $40.5 million. Total operational expenses 41.1 million, with a deficit of 639,000, and you'll see that we have a total of other financing sources that will help offset some of that deficit, with a net change of 639,000 would be the total, and that is that is primarily driven by the special revenues that you will see. But for the FY18 budget, you'll see a total of $8 million that we're expected for all funds. We're expected for the fund balance $4.4 million for the predicted FY18 ending fund balance, with all things considered. That's all of the things I wanted to highlight at this time. Any questions?
Okay. Board, do y'all have any questions you want to start with?
Okay, the numbers that you just gave us, are these the numbers that were agreed upon with the committee, the budget committee, or is this all new?
Budget committee.
Yeah, your budget committee that you had, we've been meeting since, you guys have been meeting since like what, October, November?
That was
It was
the
the
debt
long-term-
committee.
The debt committee, I'm sorry.
Right.
Debt committee, I'm sorry.
No, sir. This
is
has
the
not
budget.
been introduced to the debt committee.
Okay, so that hasn't been
these
discussed with them
numbers.
at all, okay. All right, so that being said, I think I got my committees crossed up here. Well, with that being said, so the monies that we voted on back in December, I think it was the 642,000. Now, has that been accounted for as far as any monies being left over?
We're still truing up FY17 expenditures. We do anticipate some savings in that $642,000 that was allotted for those expenditures. We track those expenditures via a separate program code, so we can readily tell you what the net savings would be. Though none of those expenditures or allotments are in this FY18 budget. No, sir. If there's any expenses that come through on this year's budget that we will see realized, if we had to pay something, that's probably due to the timing of invoices. But all of the monies were encumbered in FY17.
And Ms. Holmes, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Sparks, that money will roll over back into the fund balance, where it originally came from. Yes, sir.
And just if I can follow up on that thought, some of those programs in that 600+ thousand that we added later in the year were ones, are any of those in this year's budget? Because I mean, training, you just don't do 1 year and drop it. I mean, so I was wondering if some of the things are going to be put into this year's budget.
And
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
All of the expenses that were all of the earmarks that were made were specific for certain instructional needs and for maintenance, repairs, etc. Those things are expense for one time. It is not a continuation that the board has given us for that. It was just for FY17.
And I think I know what you're asking. Did we build it in this year's budget?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Thank you. That's
No,
what I
no,
was.
and it's an excellent question, and I think I had that question asked to me before when me and Mr. Spears talks. I think some of the issues is that we had to do so many cuts, and because they cut our federal funds with the professional development, we just we made sure, I mean, we really combed and looked at what are the important things that we need to do and not do to provide the professional development. So we still have the professional development. We don't have the Saturday academies. It wasn't fully attended to build that. We're still trying to build that culture of staying after and those kind of things. I do think the tutoring is needed, but in our minds, what we're going to do is split the professional development and tutoring with the money that we receive from the federal, not go back into fund balance right now. So we felt that the tutoring was a great impact on our kids. When we look at a lot of the data that we looked at, what it looks like is, around 82% of our kids grew a year or more. But the problem is about 60 to 70% of, 60% of that kids in the state's eyes will stay the same. So we won't necessarily get credit for growth. And so what I mean is if they were at level 2 in 3rd grade and 4th grade, they're at level 2, that just means that they grew a year, which they grew, but the state only counts it if they go level 2B. So they have to grow 2 years. And so, but it's good in the sense of the show that we at least grew kids a year or more. But we really need to grab that group that now clustered from like level 1 that we did that heavy lifting to level 2 or 3, and we have to push them forward. So it's hard because the marching orders that we have, as stewards of the money, is that we want to make sure the money that we're getting from the federal, the money we're getting from the state and local, that we draft the budget. We were not thinking that we're going to continue to keep going outside the budget. So we looked at our needs. Obviously, we cut the personnel that we need to cut in order to still balance out people and programs to make the best impact on kids with what we have.
Thank you.
Now, a couple of different issues I want to point out. Number one, on the budget is showing a deficit of a difference, more expenditures than revenues coming in, $639,000. With that being said, just to kind of go back and spotlight some of the discussions that were had when we were talking about our bond refunding, is the fact is that, as we true up the numbers throughout this year, we should see somewhere in the neighborhood of about $250,000 ballpark of a surplus in our excess collections from the local base, which will help eliminate some of this deficit that is posted here. The other part of it is that we should see coming up in September, October timeframe, the conclusion of a back tax case that should be coming in, and those dollars will further erode the amount that is actually there. And to finish the budget out, 2 variables could come into play. Number one, we could learn that some of our federal dollars are restored, if that were to be the case. But more than anything is that we can look at and say, okay, well, we have, 18% fund balance, and so we would, without making any major drawdown on it, be able to take anywhere from, say, $150,000 to $250,000 to make the final numbers be balanced as far as this. Now, on a call that we had, just so that the board will also know this, but a call we had with the ratings agency, with Moody's, what's it been, about a week ago or so?
Yes, sir.
That was one of their concerns. They said that we were deficit spending, and so we outlined the fact is that we're not deficit spending, because anyone in government realizes that deficit spending is that your revenues are less than your expenditures, and you borrow money, such as the U.S. government does, issuing bonds to fund operations or different things. We're not doing that. We're not borrowing from 16 section funds. We're not floating loans to be able to make it. We're basically just taking money from excess collections we've had in the past, which is what gives us our fund balance in 1120, to be able to balance our budget. So it's just like taking money out of your savings account to do that. So I think that was one thing that they felt is good. Now, obviously I think the questions that were asked were really good, because some of the questions that were posed by the ratings agency, the one-time expenditure, such as the $600,000, how are you rolling back, how are you cutting, and different things. And there are some other issues that are really the state of Mississippi that affect the school district, right, that may, as far as how they push the pension obligations down on our balance sheets and some other things that we're having to consider, but we have no control over, because that's a state mandate. Underfunded pension, I think is what he said. Well, we're mandated, this is what we do. However, how it relates to this budget is that it doesn't. But just understand is that as we kind of go forward, that we have to be very mindful and resourceful of, as we need different programs, we need to fund different things, is that we're not compromising the integrity of what we've been able to achieve in this budget, of keeping everything as razor thin as possible, but also still not impacting instruction. So so I don't think there was any programs or any things that were started last year that we're having to carry forward this year. I think that's what you outlined. And then just as needs arise in the district, we'll certainly have to come back and address them at that particular point. But I don't think this budget carries forward anything that was kind of a one-time effort. So,
And Mr. Spears,
yes.
excuse me, President Spears, we, and I think we're almost at a point where we may be able to balance the budget without going into deficit. Like you said, we're waiting on just a couple more factors, especially with the federal money coming that we heard whisper of. So we may still be able to balance the budget without going into our fund balance.
Right. Okay. Which is good, and so that's one of the reasons that, and I don't think between now and August the 9th that many parts will have moved around, but certainly it gives us a little bit more time to break things down to their molecular level to get everything in line before we start this budget year fully. So, is there any other questions about the budget or the revenues or anything along those lines? Okay. So that's the discussion on the budget, and just as I mentioned, if it's okay with the board, we'll take that up at what would be our review meeting on August the 9th, but the reason we take it up at that point is because we'll have to have everything approved before our actual meeting, which comes up, well, we could approve it on the 14th, but that doesn't necessarily give enough time to get everything to the council, and of course get everything filed by the deadlines of August the 15th. So we'll take it up at that point. Now, next is our discussion of the ad valorem request, 2017. Now, if you look at the top of the request, basically what it states is the base calculation, and it allows you a fiscal year defined as October 1st through September 30th. So in the past, we have been kind of going through the estimation of what the base will produce in different things. But as we go through this year, because we're having to make certain that we fully fund our debt request, we had to go back and choose a fully collected year, which if you look on the statement here, is from October 1st, 2014, which is the second line there, through September 30th, 2015, which gives us our base, and then you add in some other additions such as homestead exemption reimbursement, and that gives our total base of $10,400,000. And then if you come down and look at the debt request to pay our debts and different things, you'll see that that's about $2.38 million. So that basically shows us that our total request at this particular point is $12,781,598,000, and that's an increase of $303,000 from last year. Now, the increase is not an increase in taxes, because we actually have a mill produce more for us. So therefore, the increase is just the amount difference from what was last year to what is this year. But that is basically offset by the appreciation of how much a mill produces for the school district. So it's not an increase in taxes. It's just that we're getting more this year than we received last year. And the reason for that is because obviously we're getting more production per mill. So I want to make sure, is that clear?
I just want to make sure I ask a question.
Yes.
So you said there are no increase in taxes.
There are no increase in taxes. So
Okay.
when you see the increase of $303,000, okay.
I want to make sure, no increase in
Right.
taxes, right?
The increase of $303,000, that is that we collected somewhere about $12 million last year, Ms. Holmes. Would that be about correct?
Sorry, Mr. Spears, I was looking at the report.
Okay. I was just saying is on the ad valorem tax request, it says that is an increase of $303,165 from prior year requests. That just simply means that last year we requested $12,400,000 and so dollars, or $300,000-something, and now because we're requesting $12,781,598, that's the difference of the $300. But we're not increasing because the mill production went from, our budget last year was based on 204. This year's based on 209. We expect it to produce more than 209 per mill, but that's what we're using our budget on. Is that okay? So let's just be clear about this. All right.
Last year, if I may say,
Yes.
Mr. Spears, last year we did request 61.17 mills, and this, with the mill appreciation for this year, we are requesting the same millage from the district, 61.17.
But just to make sure, we were just requesting an amount.
That's correct.
But through that amount,
Right.
I think you said we're not raising taxes.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And if everything is just stable, not necessarily a lot of extra growth, but not a lot of businesses shutting down or whatever, then we should still see an excess collection, just as we've seen this year, if everything is just stable. So let's just see how this goes, but that's how the ad valorem request is put together. But just know this is kind of a break in pattern from how things have been done in the past, just in the sense is that we've actually used a former year's total cash collection base versus the estimation of what we think the base will produce. So that's does anyone have any other questions about the ad valorem tax request? And that will also be part of our August the 9th. I think I've got my date correct there. August the 9th review session. Now we go to the consideration to approve preliminary official statement for debt refunding. And I think, Mr. Dunn, you'd also received a copy of this. And all it is doing, and you also have the red line copy of it where they made certain revisions as far as instead of August, it's September, and some of the dates and different things. And basically, even though the board had given me approval to go ahead and make those adjustments to keep us on timeline, I put it on here just so that the board could look at it again, approve it for it to be adjusted, and then they could continue forward. And from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Hickman and Ms. Holmes, but from our phone calls and emails, it looks like that we should know our rating from Moody's coming up on maybe August the 1st, and I believe from Mr. Young that they're going to try to price the bond somewhere around August the 8th, 7th or 8th or 9th or somewhere around in there. And then it is hopeful that we will be able to start selling the bonds and have them issued in September of this year. And everything at that particular point should be concluded on this whole, process.
Correct.
So that's kind of the remaining timeline, and if there's something that changes, then I'll be certain to report it back. But as now, we're still on track to finish everything up as we move on through the rest of this, well, not the rest of this month, but in August, and finish everything out. So, Board, I need a motion for approval of the updated preliminary official statement.
So moved.
Has been motioned by Mr. Sparks. Do I have a second?
Second.
Has been seconded by Dr. Shoemake. Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we go to closed determination for executive session. I know we do have one matter. Board, I need a motion to go into closed determination.
So moved.
Has been motioned by Mr. Sparks. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. I'll be out shortly just to disclose the items to be taken up. All right. We're back in return to regular session. We did, as a board, take up one item under executive session. The recommendation by the superintendent was approved by the board. We are now back in regular session. Mr. Dunn, is there any other disclosures you think I need to make? No, I'm sorry.
That you took one action, basically, that was a release of the employment from contract employment.
That's correct. And we did vote to approve the release under the contract. And so, Board, now we come to our last item on the agenda, which is to adjourn. I need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Has been motioned by Mr. Sparks. Do I have a second? Has been seconded by Dr. Shoemake. Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. We are adjourned.